Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Running Tales podcast, where we tell the extraordinary stories of everyday runners, walkers, and wheelchair athletes. My name's Craig Lewis, and yes, folks, I am back. Thank you so much to Jason Bahamundi from our Partners Run Tri Bike, who stood in for me on our last episode 2 weeks ago. And folks, he was the absolute perfect person to do so. He spoke to fellow triathletes, Brittany Vermeer, about all things swimming, cycling, and running. And it was a really cool episode. So, folks, please do make sure to check that one out. Me, as you know, I'm more of a running type of guy. My only swimming is straight down like a stone. So we'll be back talking about movement purely on 2 feet today. Just a quick reminder, we are part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Find us on your favorite podcast platform. Please do give us a like or a positive review there. You know the score. And if you're on Spotify, folks, you can comment there too and let us know what you think of the episode. Anyway, so yeah, this week's episode, we'll be talking to Joshua Ross, who beat cancer to become an ultra runner. It's a really inspiring story, this one. Josh was diagnosed with leukemia back in 2021, and it took him 800 days, that's more than 2 years, before he achieved remission. During that recovery period, he started running every day with the aim of hitting 100 days in a row. And it was a goal that he achieved and celebrated by competing in his first ever race. It wasn't a local 5K though, or even a half marathon. Instead, Joshua took on a 55K ultra race, complete with 10,000 feet of elevation gain. So let's get Joshua forward now. Let's have a chat to him and find out exactly how he did that and about his running story. Hi, Joshua. How you doing?
Good, Craig. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Running Tales podcast. And I guess it makes sense to kind of start at not the beginning of your story, but maybe the beginning of this story, which would have been when you got that dreadful news that you had leukemia. I mean, first of all, how did that kind of hit you? Were you immediately positive about it?
No, I was not positive. I was scared, and you have no choice but to be in the experience. And I was learning that as it unfolded. I basically was preparing to learn how to accept mortality and how to die if that was going to be the case, because whenever you hear cancer, that's kind of your affiliation with the word that, this is the end. Luckily, I got a type of highly treatable leukemia. We've kind of cracked the code on this one, and most people diagnosed with this disease end up living a fairly normal life expectancy. So I really clung to that early on. I was like, okay, I don't know what this means like for my everyday life, but at least I have a future. Yeah.
And at what stage within that? Because as I just mentioned in that intro there, you had it was a long road to recovery or road to remission. At what stage did you think exercise and running is going to be an important part of this to keep me going?
Yeah. So I was not a runner ever previously to this. I ran like a little bit, but I was really active in the gym. To be honest, I was probably the last candidate in the world to get cancer because I was taking exceptional care of myself. So I was no stranger to exercise, but I wasn't a big runner. And then I went through like a lot of upheaval at that time. I navigated divorce at the same time that I was navigating seeking of remission. And in a lot of ways, that was more traumatic and more confusing than dealing with cancer. I mean, it doubled down like on my fear because I had to learn how to navigate it all alone and how to deal with this sense of rejection and this massive identity change that divorce was compelling me into. And so I just turned to running as a way to cope and as a way to ground me in the world and to give my life discipline and meaning, because without that, I was just so focused on the fear all of the time. Like, when is this all going to be taken away? Because there was so much uncertainty, and I still live with that uncertainty. I still get treatment I still have to see my oncologist. So that's always a factor. But when I took up running, I noticed that it was giving me a sense of confidence in my ability to handle whatever life was going to throw at me. And it helped me go from the mindset of not, I don't want to say like a victim mindset and imply that people that have cancer or get cancer are victims, but it takes away that mindset that you are under attack and that you still have the option to act in a way that is constructive.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been fortunate enough never to have to go through anything like that, but as I think you intimated there, it must sort of at stages of it feel like the absolute end of the world. And I guess that's what you mean when you're talking about, inverted commas, the idea of being a victim of something. I'm interested why you're obviously an active guy beforehand, even though it wasn't running. Why therefore did it become running that you turned to at that stage specifically, rather than saying, I might try and get down the gym, if that was even possible at the time?
Yeah. Well, I don't really know. It was around the new year when I pledged to run 100 days in a row, and it was honestly, this may sound a little weird, but it wasn't a rational decision. It was almost like I was being compelled by something greater than me, and this thing was pushing me to act. And so in a way, running was just a natural solution for me as an athlete to take up in the face of all of this uncertainty and in this adversity. And I wanted it to transcend my own life. So I posted publicly on social media that I was going to run in solidarity with anyone, not necessarily cancer patients, with anyone who at this time of year in America, for the new year, when New Year's resolutions, and it's like, I'm going to show you that you can be consistent. You can make a promise to yourself, and you can develop confidence, through competency, if you just stick with what you say you're going to do. And so I made it public. And once I said I was going to do it, there was no going back. And I didn't expect to get from it what I got from it. There were days when it was exceptionally hard, and I was learning all about how the body behaves when it's fatigued and how it adapts. Like, it shocked me how much the body can adapt from when you think you're actually a strong athlete and you're not, you're pretty mediocre. But then as the body adapts, you expand into this next level, and that was really empowering. So I don't know exactly why, other than I just had this hunch that I had to run. It was almost like it was as if a voice told me to run, and I listened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then did a lot of it.
Yeah.
And then I suppose what I'm not sure if I made clear just now, and we were chatting about online beforehand, was the fact that you started the running before you'd actually been before you'd moved into remission.
Mhm.
That must have been exceptionally hard at times, because presumably you were still undergoing cancer treatment at that point, which must have made some of those days when you were running just incredibly tough.
Yeah, so I take a chemotherapeutic that's a targeted type of therapy. I have to take that for at least 5 years. And there are significant side effects to that drug, but I determined early on that it was going to be a vitamin, and I wasn't going to think about what it may do to me. I was going to think about it just as part of me, as part of my DNA now. That being said, fatigue was a major issue. And I don't mean just fatigue, I'm tired because I just ran 10 miles. I mean, it's like a weariness. And I just continued to push through that, not entirely sure if I was just harming myself further. But this was when I began to change, I think, into the person I am now. Just had this iron will. I was just going to see it through. And I actually achieved remission during that 100-day running challenge around 80 days in. And I think it had a lot to do, well, there was a number of factors, but I think it had a lot to do with that I had gave my life trajectory again. I didn't necessarily have like a meaningful job at that point, and I was navigating the divorce and, you know, navigating this identity flux, and the running gave me a confidence boost, and it allowed me to, you know, basically learn how to accept myself and believe in myself. And I think that whole mind body axis when it comes to these diseases is really important.
This might sound like a really weird question, but it kind of popped into my head, and now I suppose I've got to think how to phrase it. But it's you're never going to welcome something like leukemia, but it almost sounds like it was the cancer has, in a weird way, led you into a better situation, into a better life with more purpose. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say that without a lot of ambivalence, because no one wants that kind of wake up call. But there is some truth to that, and I think not just with me, but universally, you know, many people like will hit rock bottom, and they change their life for the better. And my first oncologist, she said to me, and I love this woman because she was kind of like a hard ass. She was like really, I mean, she was scientific, she was blunt, and she told me, you know, this is your second chance at life.
Yeah.
You need to go live your life. And honestly, I don't know if it was the cancer so much as it was like losing a relationship with a person that I thought I was going to have a relationship with. But the cancer did change my relationship to myself. It made me get more clear on what I want out of life, how I'm going to spend my time, who I'm going to spend my time with, what I'm willing to tolerate, you know, what I'm willing to navigate in the world. And so it did empower me in a way to stop trying to please others, for instance, all the time, and to say no. Because once you, I kind of obsess about this, once you like get a little glimpse of your mortality, you don't forget it. And it's very easy. People, especially these days, write so much about stoicism and accepting death, and it's all abstract. They actually haven't walked that path. But once you've walked that path, you're more free. So if I could say that anything positive about being a cancer patient, it's that it taught me the value of, you know, following your curiosity in life and honoring that, because today is not a prelude for tomorrow. And a lot of people live today as a prelude. And I refuse to do that now. You know, yeah. I would say that it's softened me. It's not, I was hard and firm before and kind of stuck in my ways, you know, and cancer will make you reflect on, you know, how can I develop into the most fully dilated human being that I can be. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. I've spoken to a few other people on the podcast in the past who've had conditions such as cancer, and a lady who had has cystic fibrosis, and she kind of said something similar in the way that it just really focuses the mind and makes you know that these decisions are important now. We don't get this you don't get a go over. It's once and out kind of thing, I suppose. And you know that once you can really focus your mind on that, not in a negative, depressing way, but in a way of, right, well, let's go out and grab life, then it can be quite freeing.
Yeah, you get permission.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. When you were starting to do the running and so on, what was the reaction? I mean, you mentioned the hard-nosed doctor there. What was the reaction of your other doctors? Were they like, Joshua, you can't do this, or were they like, this is good for you, go and do it?
Yeah, no, nobody ever said not to do it. My first doctor, when I was diagnosed initially, told me emphatically, she yelled at me, she said, do not lose your conditioning. And I mean, I will never it is very rare for a doctor to be as demonstrative as that. And yeah. I took that, you know, as gospel. Like I'm going to stay in shape. So, but I don't think that my either of my oncologists. My first oncologist said, she's been doing this for a long time. She's had many cancer patients, and she said, there's no one with CML is doing this. Like, and I was like, good, because I want to set a higher like standard of possibility for people who get this giant slap in the face and the rug gets swept out from under them, and then they feel stuck in that fearful place. And I wanted to, so I would share this with my doctors, like, this is why I'm doing this. Like, if there are people out in the world who are given this diagnosis, I want them to understand that there's someone out there who's taking action and is just going right toward it, and is not like letting the fear dictate their lives. So both of my doctors, especially the first one, they were in full support of it. I think for them, especially given the nature of their jobs and how many people they lose, it's refreshing to have a patient who's just like, I'm gonna do whatever I can to show the universe that I really want to stick around for a while.
Yeah, and I think when we were speaking again online before, that went as far as kind of running around the treatment room with various wires hanging out of your arms and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was doing lunges, and the nurse yelled at me because I was at risk for a cardiac incident because I had so many white blood cells. So but at being fit, I stood a better chance of not having a cardiac incident because my capillary system was super flexible. But at that point, I didn't know what type of leukemia I had. Like, there are some really bad types. I probably wouldn't be here if I had a different type, or I wouldn't have had the opportunity to run the way that I've run. And yeah, so in the hospital, I got out of my bed and I walked around with, I think it's called the amnuensis, and then the bladder is the bag, and I did some lunges, and I even like recorded it on my Strava app, because I wanted evidence that like I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I ran as soon as I got out of the hospital, like I just commenced with walking, but at that time I was dealing with, it's beyond fatigue. Like you have nothing left. Like I have never experienced a fatigue that is so total. I mean, I don't think that you can get there if you ran 1,000 miles. I think that it's like your energy leaves you, and there's nothing you can do to get it back except for to rest. Yeah. So early on, like when I left, I wanted to continue running, but I couldn't. My legs were like swollen. They were enormous, and I was dealing with a lot of edema and some really bad rashes and then terrible anxiety. So I had a beautiful friend, my friend Sean. Thank you, Sean. I love you so much. He would like come and walk with me throughout that time. And like I puttered like an old man, and I was very self-referential at that time because I was so scared, and I was clinging to like my ego, and I was like, God, how do I deal with this? And Sean is a very spiritual person and was helping me navigate through that. So like I look back on that, and it was like their perseverance was there, but luckily I recovered to the extent where I could take up running again. And I like early on it would be like a mile.
Yeah.
And that was a massive accomplishment. Yeah.
I'm actually just going to throw ahead slightly with a question that's just come into my head there when you're talking about that fatigue and getting through that moment and just being able to walk. How much, when you went on, and we'll talk about it later to talk about the running you've done since then, when you've hit hard spots in the runs you've done, like 50Ks or whatever since then, I'm guessing you're kind of like, well, it's never going to be as bad as when I was that fatigued at that stage. Does that kind of help you to get through the hard spots in runs that you're doing now?
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective. I never felt that any of the runs that I did were suffering. For instance, I I don't like to say that I resent the use of that word, like for runners, because if you're choosing to do it, then it is awesome to have that choice. And it's more like you're in a state of gratitude. And one of my favorite runners, Cameron Haynes, who's a bow hunter and lives in Oregon, and he's almost 60, and he's currently injured, but he's a different he has a different mentality. And he said years ago, I'll never forget, he said that my pain is a gift from God. And I thought, yeah, if you're in pain, then you are alive and you have something to be grateful for. So during a run, like, honestly, if I was in pain and the worse the pain was, like, at that time, I was grieving so much. I was grieving, like, my life changing so much and navigating divorce. And I would actually just emote on the trail and I would cry. Like, the pain would take my nervous system and it would get me out of my head, and it would allow, like, my body to purge all of this fear and all of this, like, this spiritual constriction that I was feeling. And I loved it. So it made the physical pain amazing. Like, the more of it I could get by working harder, the stronger I would feel. And I never thought of it once as suffering. I was like, it's not. Like, that I'm here, it's a gift. This is not suffering. I'm choosing to do this. This is living.
Oh, that's incredible. That's incredible.
It was a superpower, Craig, to be honest. It was just like, it was such a motivator.
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of brings me back to the next question I was going to ask, and you may have answered a little bit of it in what you just said there, but it was that obviously you hadn't done running before, and then you went into doing this new sport at your absolute sort of physical low, as a mental low. I mean, you could have just hated it. You could have gone out there and hated every second of it. Well, obviously you didn't. And I think you may have just explained why, but yeah.
I didn't know what to expect. I was scared to do that race. I had never run even a 5K. I'd never done a mile, like a 4th of July mile or anything like that, or a marathon. And this was really mountainous country in Idaho.
Yeah.
That being said, I had run, 103 days in a row, and then I took like a day off and I went right back into training. So I was fit. I was way more fit than I actually understood. And I didn't know how to pace myself. And for like the first 15 miles, I kind of I didn't run. I climbed really hard and really fast. And I stopped and I talked to a lot of people. I talked to Nikki Kimball, who's like a legendary American ultra runner. And we had great chats, and she has dealt with her own albatrosses in life. And I was just blown away. And I took there's so much love and weird, like, freaky support in the ultra community that it is competitive, but I was really only competing at that point with disease and like the spiritual crisis that I was in. And so I was just feeding off of that during the race. And like, I just got progressively happier and happier as the race went on. Because I did stop and I took time to make friends and to connect with people, and it was kind of fun to like tell people my story and then dust them. Because I want to motivate them, I'm like, all right, look, if I can do this, if I'm out here, like, you've got more. Let's see what you've got, Yeah.
Oh man, that would definitely have me digging a little bit deeper. Something. Look at him disappearing.
Yeah.
In remission 2 months ago or something.
Yeah.
Just to rewind slightly, because I just introduced it as a 55K race, I think, in the start. Can you explain to people what the race was, and I think maybe more importantly, what it was that made you choose to do that race at the end of your 100-day challenge, rather than saying, "Oh well, I'll do a half marathon," or something that a new runner might normally try?
Yeah, I was in a run club in Livingston, Montana, and one of our members suggested that we sign up for that race in Idaho, and he signed up for the 30K, him and his wife. And I I decided why not go for something more challenging. I was terrified of the 100K. In retrospect, I'm glad that I didn't do it for my first race. So that was why, because basically I was following social cues from my run group. I literally knew nothing about the ultra running world. I had a friend for years, I still have, who was like, has crushed ultras throughout his career. But I didn't know to what extent they existed everywhere. And so I just signed up, and we went over together, like a 4 or 5 of us. Yeah.
There is nothing quite as ridiculous in the world as the peer pressure of a run group to just something completely crazy, and you just go, yeah, I can do that, and then you realize it's 50K over mountains or whatever it might be. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think I did say right when I finished, I was done. I would never do that again, but it was probably hours before I was online, like the next day. Man, that was fun. I love those people. I think I might have to do another one of those.
Yeah. Have you gone back and done shorter races since, or is the ultra community just your place to be?
I've done 50Ks, so a little shorter. Oh yeah, actually a year ago on Sunday, I ran a trail marathon in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, that was short and sweet, and that's like a great distance, but it's just about the time when you're starting to break down and get in pain, and then you're done. Yeah,
I'm imagining some of our listeners listening to this at the moment and shouting at you because they may have only ever done a half marathon or something, and you've just called a marathon a short and sweet race. So I love that.
Yeah, well, I think a road marathon may be the longest race on earth if you're trying to excel, because you're just maintaining that speed. But the thing is, with a trail marathon, there are times when you have to walk. You can't run up the grade. So it gives you a break. It engages different muscles. And I mean, that's not to say if you want to be competitive that you can go easy. You have to learn how to, when you get to the top of the hill after that walk, you have to just lay down the gas, Yeah. And I guess I would never, I am so proud of people who start running, who try, because when I started years ago, I ran a half mile and it killed me. It was terrible. And I was like, holy shit, I will never be able to run again. My body felt like it was literally just going to rattle apart. And then I slept, and I just kept trying, and I kept trying. And over time, you get the adaptations. And so I will never say that a marathon is short. Definitely not. Any mile that you run is a mile earned.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's so true. So what sort of runner are you, Joshua? Are you out there at the front of the pack now, or are you solid in the middle or the back, or even?
Yeah, every race that I've done, I've started out slow. I did an 88K last May. I had no idea how my body was gonna handle that, so I walked very fast for the first marathon, and then I just went as fast as I could for the second half of that race. And that, but that was another 10,000 feet of climbing. So it gave me a chance to slow down and to walk fast, but to slow down. That's the thing about running. If you're not out there to just finish, you have to learn through experience how to pace, how to fuel yourself, what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are. And I think that I've always held back in the beginning because I've been afraid to break down. And I tend to get more energized as a race goes on, and I will pass tons of people at that point. But I will never be at the front of the pack at that point, because those people have been pushing themselves from the beginning, which is really noble. Because that takes balls to just grind out 55 miles as hard as you can and win a race. I'm so impressed with those people, but all the people who beat me are in their 20s. So
Well, if you're winning your age group, that's always a big win, I think.
yeah, that's great. And I think so this year I'm going to do a trail marathon at the end of May in Vermont, and I'm going to try to win. It's not a big pool of runners, but I'm going to do something different than I've done before. I'm just going to go hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I flatten out at some point, that's probably a fueling issue.
I think Jason, who's producing today, obviously chatting in the green room beforehand, his motto, I'm going to get it wrong now, I'm sure he'll pop up and tell me, is all speed, no brakes. So that's his way of running ultras, and all gas, no brakes. See, I told you I get it wrong. All gas, no brakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he'll give you a training plan of how to show up and blow up.
Yeah, show up and blow up. Yeah, I think that's a decent strategy, depending on the distance. Yeah. I mean, Jason's probably a really strong runner, so he might not blow up after 55 miles. But if he blows up at 40, the guy being me that didn't blow up early is going to pass him. That's my goal. Yeah. 'Cause I love using that. I love hunting people down. That for some reason, that's really inspirational to me, and it gives me energy. Like if I get a glimpse of you. So I've had a strategy for every race that I've done. If I see you ahead of me, I will pass you, and you will not pass me. And that has so far worked. And there's one person out there with whom this didn't work, and she's a really fast runner. She's my friend Nicole. It was that first race that I did. I had actually never met her, and I told a friend of hers that I would beat Nicole, but I didn't even know what Nicole looked like. Right. And I saw this person go around a building right as we came back into town to finish the race. And little did I know it was Nicole, and I couldn't catch her because when she's gassing, she's like pushing like 6 30-minute miles. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quick on the ultra. But one thing I didn't mention, we've sort of touched on, I joked about age groups then, but you actually did win your age group in that very first race, that first ultra. Was that a complete shock to you? How did it feel to get to the end? You've gone through this whole journey with leukemia, with the 100 days, with almost learning to run. And then you did this race that you were sort of harangued into by your running club, and you got to the end of it, and wow.
Yeah, so I blazed through that race, and like I said, I walked fast for the first 15 miles. Like I ran a bit, but I didn't crush myself. So I finished in 6.5 hours, and I think I probably could have done like a 6-hour finish if I was really pushing. But I had never heard of age class. I had no idea that such thing existed. And when I went up to the table to get they give you a stone for finishing, and she said, "Oh, you've won your age class. Do you want a picture?" And they put me on the podium, and they took a picture, and I was standing there, and there was no one next to me because they were nowhere in sight. People that were 40 and above hadn't yet come in, and so that came as a complete surprise to me. Yeah.
How I mean, I suppose that was a little cherry on top, but how amazing did it feel when you got to the end of that run, considering your journey to get to that point?
I don't know how other people. I was really proud of the effort that I put out. But I was also exhausted. What with all that I had been navigating, and like I said, there was a lot of emoting going on. Like I was just like spontaneously crying out there, like thanking my grandmother who was like a really central figure of my life, like running through the woods, like thinking about how she used to mop the floor on her hands and knees. And I was like, man, Graham, you work so much harder than I'm working right now. And like that was motivation for me. So it was a really like emotional experience to go through the race. So by the time that it finished, I didn't really even have I didn't know. It took me a while to understand like what I had done, and I slept on it, and it took me a few days to recover. And that was when I was like, wow, like it's impressive that anyone's going to go out there and do that. And it gave me the confidence that I needed to go forward in life, and to believe in myself again.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's always an interesting question for long distance and endurance runners, is the knock-on effects that doing those distances and going through those things. I mean, it sounds almost like a therapy session for you as you're going around that course as well. But
Yeah.
how that can translate into everyday life, and presumably that's something that you've found has helped you.
I would recommend it to anyone who feels stuck in life to just start running. Because if you feel stuck and you develop a better reputation with yourself through these actions that seem impossible, your whole perspective changes. And it, like, running does become a proxy for other hardships in life. So before I did anything like this, I was definitely convinced that there was no way that I could. And it was only by doing it that I became convinced that it's actually not that hard. It's just showing up and putting in the work. Yeah.
Would you have believed that was possible on that first day when you were told you had leukemia and you didn't know? I mean, blunt, I suppose you didn't know that whether there was another month left for you in this world, sort of thing.
I do remember saying to my oncologist that this was in Bozeman, Montana, and there were a lot of active people there, a lot of doctors at that hospital who were triathletes and Ironman athletes and marathoners and ultra runners. And I told her, I was like, you should round up a bunch of them right now and I'll race them around the hospital, because I still got it in me. Like, I'm not going to quit. And she just, this is what I loved about this woman. She just looked at me stone faced, she just allowed me to have that conviction.
Yeah.
And she made no promises. When like we talked about before, it was like cancer actually just made me more determined. It made me more determined to try as hard as I possibly can. It was before then where I would have been convinced there's no way I'm running 55K in Idaho, for my first race. Most people, they titrate it. But I just went for it, and I'm so glad that I did, because it did, everything after just kind of seemed basic. And I was a little nervous to try 55 miles. I didn't know if I was going to finish. And then I saw, when I signed up for the race, I saw that David Goggins had run it. And my goal was to beat David Goggins' time, but I didn't pace myself well. And I know that I could beat his time because this was before he was a really strong runner, but I wanted that cachet. But so I was like having some conversations with David Goggins, and he's like, you know how David Goggins speaks, and I could hear his voice in my head, and he would be telling me, you're not going to beat my time. And I might have lost a little sleep over it. I was intimidated. But then once I did the 55 miles, it was the same as the 34 miles that I ran in Idaho. It was like that was way more difficult in my imagination than it was in reality. And that would be like the lesson that I would want everyone to take from their running practice. We make our lives more difficult in our heads than they are actually in the world. And it pays dividends to believe in yourself and to say yes to things and to just try. If you fail, try again.
Yeah, that's such a powerful message, isn't it? Whether in running or in life, that, do you know what? Actually, if you turn up, you put the work in, you have a positive mindset, then our bodies and our minds as human beings are capable of so much more than what 90% of us can probably ever imagine. But it's there in us, isn't it?
Yeah, and it really frees people up. And I mean, like, that's what I want as a runner. I want it to not be about my accomplishments. I want to be an example to other people who feel trapped in these constructions, or they're conscripted to stories of themselves that are no longer working, and they're versions of themselves that are outdated. And they really have to go through this period of darkness and open their hearts up to the world and say, I'm here. I want to grow. I'm listening. I'm ready to do the work. I'm ready to be challenged.
Yeah, and you mentioned that as kind of a reason for why you started the hunt, doing the 100 days in the first place. Did you get a lot of feedback from people as you chronicled that journey?
Yeah, quite a bit for me. I don't have a big following on Instagram, but I was getting random people following me. It was gaining traction, and I was writing a lot about my experience and just trying to be thoughtful with my messaging. And I was for me getting noticed, you know. And I think, at least from the feedback that I was getting, it was inspiring people to try, you know.
Yeah, and I suppose the follow up to that is because these things, it can be like I can't think what the opposite of like a vicious circle is, like a meretricious circle or something. The feedback gives you another boost to go out and do it again. Then you write about it again. Then it gives somebody else a bit more inspiration, and that inspiration comes back to you, and it sort of pushes everything forward.
Yeah, that's what you hope, right? Like, I really do think that, you know, if you throw a stone into a pond or a lake that's calm, it ripples, and the concentric circles become wider and wider and wider. And I feel that way about kind action. And I was especially moved as a runner by the indigenous practice of Southwestern Native Americans who run for the health of the tribe, not for the health of the individual. They do things called like spirit runs. Yeah. And I was like, I want to conceive of my running practice as something that is throwing that proverbial stone into the pond and creating a ripple effect into the world. You know, otherwise it's just kind of self-serving, and that's a dead end.
And again, that is such a freeing way of looking at running, because we can get obsessed as runners with, some runners might want to win the race. You want to get your PB, you want to log everything on Strava, or make sure your VO2 max is at its very best, or whatever. And listen, I don't want to really knock all of those things,
Yeah.
because they're valid in themselves in a way, but I don't think they're ever as important as I suppose what you're talking about.
Yeah, if you win every race, you're not going to be able to help that person who's rolled an ankle at mile 30 and needs to get out of the woods. And it's good to remember, you know, if I see someone hurt, I mean, I do want to win, I want to beat them, but I'm not going to leave them there in a state of need without asking first if I can be of help. And I think that for most people in the ultra running community, unless they're sociopathic, and we probably have some of those people, you know, or professional runners and their livelihood depends on it, yeah, they have to come with that competitive edge, and that's different. But you do encounter in the woods, you just encountered these people. Most ultra runners, in my experience, have been through some pretty substantial challenges in life: trauma, addiction, disease, I mean, unspeakable things. And I hold them in such high esteem for leaning into those experiences and moving through these chosen hardships deliberately. It's like, it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I always find it. I've spoken to loads of ultra runners on this podcast, and obviously my sort of fellow hosts on the network do as well. And you have so many people who have either that trauma or that backstory to what they're doing, and it is out of this self-doubt or this problems that comes from just incredible running performances. And yeah, it always amazes me. We have the Enduring Minds podcast as well on the Everyday Athlete podcast network. There's a fascinating chat about like the mental health generally, but also of runners. And I just think that it goes to another level sometimes with ultra runners. It really is a quite unique tribe of people.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
What's next for you, Joshua? What's in the pipeline? You got any races coming up?
I have not signed up for anything. I've been running a lot. I'm in great running shape right now. So I could probably run fairly competitively in anything that I sign up for right now. But I think that I'm going to just do a trail marathon, or I'm going to try to do that 88K that I did last year and crush my previous time, because I now know how to pace myself a little better. But that means I have to put more of a premium on competing early and less of a premium on talking with people and creating community, because I love talking to people and creating connections. And I think running has given me the opportunity to couch surf anywhere basically and go on a jog and share that time with people. I'm really interested in like what brought other people to that race and to that day. And I get caught up in conversations. So I think I'll try to go out there and do it differently this time, and maybe do a little volunteering at the race beforehand and hang out after to make those connections, and then just really try to compete with myself and see what kind of time I can put down.
Yeah. And are you the same in your in your training? You mentioned a running club earlier. Do you kind of have to run with other people, or do you have the ability to go out and kind of run on your own as well, or does that get a little bit lonely?
No, I run on my own, and I ran on my own. I would always run before or after my run club runs, because my run club runs were too short for me, and I needed the therapy of running. And you know, it's now become such a standard part of my everyday life that in order to function at my best, like to be most clear and most focused and most in touch with my body and centered, I run. So I don't need to rely on motivation. I actually just love to do it. There are times when I'm overdoing it, when I want to quit and I want to back off. And it's hard to navigate that as an ultra runner, and especially as a cancer patient. Like, how far do I push myself? I don't want to like weaken my immune system and jeopardize my health. So it's a fine line to cross, but no, I'm very much internally motivated. I think, as most serious ultra runners are, you know, it's a problem if they're not running. Then they need to learn how to refashion their identities. And especially like when you're dealing with an injury or you're dealing with an illness, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something you've had to go through yet? That period of when you pick up that first injury and you can't run for a couple of months, or something else happens in your life that stops you being able to run for a little while. Has that happened to you yet? And how did you manage to get through it?
Yeah. So last year I ran myself into the ground. I mean, I ran a lot for me. It was like 1,440 miles that I kept track of. It was probably a lot more than that because I didn't record all my runs, but I also lifted weights like 3 to 5 times a week. So at that point, you know, I was still dealing with a lot of these changes in life, and I just kept going through all of the fatigue and the pain and the discomfort in a way because I didn't know what else to do. And then my life began to change. I started to learn how to honor what I want and honor what I'm looking for in my relationships, and to be still with myself. And so I started to have more positive experiences. And it was like the universe was kind of saying, okay, you've done what you needed to do. And now, like, these are the fruits from that spate of work. And my body at the same time was like, we are done running. And all the joy went out of it. And so I pivoted because I knew early on that I did not want to get attached to an identity as a runner. I didn't want to be that monolithic. So I just went back to the gym and I put on 8 pounds of muscle this winter. And then when I started running again this spring, I felt like a bus. I could barely move. It was so embarrassing. All my speed was gone. All my like agility was gone. Tons of power and strength, but no endurance. And they're two different animals. Yeah. So and I really like restarting the process, because you have to get humbled again and again and again, you know, and you have to learn, honestly, like how to accept where you're at and be patient, because your body doesn't adapt overnight. And that is the case for if you get into a car accident, if you get a cancer diagnosis, if you lose someone you love, you have to learn to be in that period, that season of your life, and not to resist it. And because there is something you can do to focus your unique gifts in the world into something you can offer.
Yeah, I think it is really important, because a lot of runners can become simply that person who's put into a box where they are just a runner. It can become everything to them, and during that period of success, if you like, whatever success is for them, that can be amazing. But once that thing that comes in the way, that injury, that shift in work hours, whatever it is, happens, then it can be a fall from an awful height. So it really is important to have that something else there, I suppose, to have that wider understanding of an enjoyment of life.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's important. It's so integral to your mental health, your spiritual health. You have to, I mean, as a runner, as an athlete, I think it's really important to have a spiritual side to the practice. You have to be connected to that, will help you navigate whatever comes at you. But if you're not connected to that before whatever's coming for you arrives, there's a lot of hell to pay, because you just are suddenly in turmoil and you don't know what to do. I mean, I think you can make a living off of helping people navigate that crossroads in life.
Yeah, definitely. And Joshua, perhaps just finally, to, I suppose, go back to to almost the start of this story. What is you obviously you are in remission, but what is your current health situation? Is it are you sort of constantly having one eye over your shoulder? I think you kind of hinted at that at one point. And does that affect the way that you run and live generally?
That is a great question. I navigated. So the way that this works is, early on, your brain interprets every little bump in the road as a potential catastrophe. And you get stuck in that neural loop of worrying. For instance, like 6 weeks ago, I had a bloody nose, and I had a lot of those during the early days of my treatment. And my brain was unable to tell the difference between just this ordinary day where my nose was dry because it's the dead of winter here in the Adirondacks. It was unable to tell the difference between the moment and back in time. And my brain immediately slipped back into that panic, like, oh, you're losing control. And part of the practice of acceptance is you have to work with the truth that you are out of control. So I've gotten better, and I feel like I'm always improving, and I'm able to not interpret bumps in the road, negative experiences, as reflections of like my character, bad luck, or my disease. But it is really challenging, and that's been the biggest mental health obstacle, is distinguishing between threats and just ordinary life. Like yesterday, a deer like came off of a cliff and it hit my car, and it like totaled the front end, and it was late in the day, and I was just about to trade my car in, and there have been like a series of problems that preceded it that were causing me stress. And then this deer thing happened, and immediately I went into this, I was angry, and I took it personally. And then I talked to my partner, and her parents were in a terrible car accident last spring, and like they barely made it through. And she wrote me a message, and she was like, "That's figure outable. Like, you can fix your car. I'm just so glad you're not hurt." And she told me like what we have in our ordinary life, and she was so grateful for that. And I was able to come out of that place in my mind where I'm feeling like I'm not in control and I'm scared and I'm angry, and I came back into like a state of abundance. And that is like the work always. Like I want to be in a state of abundance, especially around this disease, because if I'm not, then the fear takes over and I worry about getting sick and leaving the people that I love and not being able to compete as an athlete and living in a room in a hospital for an undetermined length of time and going through surgeries and pain and, you know, and all of that stuff. So I try to keep my mind in the present moment and in the abundance of the moment, because that is a skill, my friend. And it is a hard-earned skill. It is so much harder than running, but running in a way will help you be there, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's, I mean, Joshua, that is so true. All of that. I think you've probably had it times 10 because of what you've gone through, but it's kind of the big challenge for us all in life is to how we react to those negative moments and to that potential for catastrophizing or whatever it might be in that moment. Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like, okay, you needed a bit of a nudge from your partner to get through it, but actually you reacted to that. It was, you know, it's a car at the end of the day, but that's a pretty shitty situation. So
yeah,
you know, I can understand why that would be annoying, and it sounds like you reacted in the end in exactly the way. So yeah, well done. And I think running probably is definitely something that would help with that.
Yeah, the more difficulty you navigate in life, I feel like you have the option. You can quit and sit back and allow it to happen, or you can look at it as an opportunity, because I really do believe that disruption presents as opportunity, or opportunity presents as disruption. And all of us, given our evolutionary brains, you know, we're hardwired to survive and be afraid. But if you can overcome that and take a moment to reflect and develop confidence in yourself and be like, I can handle this. I can handle this. This happens to all of us, you know? And there are people out there. The thing that I have had to remind myself is there are people out there who want to help you, but they can't help you if you don't ask. Yeah.
Joshua, thank you. That's really powerful stuff, and I think a really good place for us to end our chat today on the Running Tales podcast. So thank you so much for joining me today and for telling your story. I really appreciate it. Folks, thank you so much for listening in to Joshua and I chatting for what's coming up to the last hour now. My name is Craig Lewis. This is Running Tales on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. You can find us on well, basically wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all the other good places. And we'd love to see you there. We'd love to carry on chatting in the community. We're part of Run, Try, Bike. And so go and check them out as well. And please listen to all the other shows. There are so many cool shows on this podcast network. I basically spend my time outside of Running Tales just listening to the shows that Jason and Joe Harden and everybody else on this wonderful network, Adam Lee, put together and push out there, and to the wonderful guests who have fantastic inspirational stories. Honestly, folks, if you want to be inspired, have a listen to some of the other stories and the other guests on there. Stories like Joshua's and so much more. So yeah, again, thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you in another 2 weeks' time for another